This Indian Enfield 500 Bullet actually used to be my own bike, but I sold it to someone who inquired as to whether I would sell it and how much I might want for it, and surprisingly to me, he bought it and left me without an Indian Enfield 500. But since he bought it, it had already sort of had an aluminium cylinder barrel fitted and I believe a Hitchcock cylinder head before I owned it, so it was tuned to a degree, and I do remember that it was capable of easily reaching 80 miles an hour. But I sold it, and I was talking to the guy about the Asbo bullets and he liked the sound of that, and the time came when he brought it to me to fully strip the engine and go right through it and give it the Asbo treatment, lighten the crank and bump the compression ratio up and port the head a little bit more and so on. So I did all that, and he's been very happy with it as far as I know. But he's brought it back. We were discussing doing this at some stage, and we seem to have come to that stage where the 4-speed gearbox, obviously they have quite a jump from third to fourth, so he's bought the bits to enable me to do the job, and we're going to be opening up the gearbox and changing the 2 gears that we have in this bag here, and that is the close ratio conversion for the 4-speed gearbox. Let's get them out. There we are. So those 2 there are what I'm going to be opening up the gearbox to change. I might be able to do it just by removing the outer and inner gearbox covers. If the gears come off fairly easily off their shafts, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, they're all well and good. If there's a bit of a problem, I'll have to take the main shaft out possibly, which will mean taking the clutch off. But I've got to work on the clutch anyway because he's got new friction plates and springs in there, so let's get it on the bike lift and see what we can do with it, and I'll film any bits that may be of interest as we go along through the job. Right, I've got the outer gearbox cover off now, and I'm ready to start undoing the various screws and so on to take this one off. And I'll be taking this cap off as well because I'll need access to the nut on the end of the main shaft to undo that and remove it, so that hopefully I can slip the cover off, slip the main shaft through the bearing in a race and get this cover off. I'll be undoing all the screws. There's no need to disturb the stop plate for the selector mechanism. That can stay fastened up tightly, so the gear change will work just as it did before when it's all put back together. I won't have to slew the stop plate around to find the sweet spot or anything, because I can get at that screw there and that screw there without removing it. I won't be touching that one. You don't want to touch that one. That's got nothing to do with it. Leave that alone. That holds the kickstart pole stop plate on, and if you undo that and the stop plate drops in, well, that's an extra little bit of hassle. So there's all these screws around here, and this lock nut has to come off the end of the indent plunger, which can also be unscrewed, but the cover will come off out the way with just the nut removed. So I'll have a little bit of a clean up here and we'll get this cover off next, and then we'll be looking straight at the end of the gearbox shafts, which is where I want to be. I've got the gearbox end cover off now, and we're looking directly at the 2 gears that I need to swap for the 2 in the close ratio conversion kit. The gears haven't slipped off the shafts just by getting hold of them and trying to slide them off, so I'll use various methods of gentle persuasion and leverage and so on and see if they relent. But if not, I'll have to take the shafts out and deal with them in the workshop. And I'll also, even if these gears were to come off, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the new ones will just slide on. They might need driving or pressing on, so it's looking more and more likely that I'll have to dismantle the gearbox and get the main shaft out and the lay shaft out in order to get those gears off them. But I'll have a little go and see if I can shift them, and if they do come off with the shafts in situ, then obviously I will try and fit the replacement gears in situ, but that may not happen going on what I've seen here so far. Here we are on the primary drive side of ASBO 43, and we can see that the condensation or moisture somehow has got into that primary chain oil and turned it into a sort of porridge like substance. So it's probably just as well that we went in this side anyway, and also the primary chain tension needs adjusting, I would say, although this obviously wobbles around because we got no bearing supporting the other end of the main shaft anymore, so don't be alarmed by that. That's only to be expected. But what I'll be doing next is I'll take the pressure plate screws out, remove the pressure plate, and then I'll lock it in top gear again and adjust the brake back up as I had before, so that the brake is on and holding the rear wheel locked, and then I'll be able to work against that when I undo the nut on this end of the gearbox main shaft, which holds the clutch centre on. So that's the next part of the plan, and then once that's undone, I'll be able to pull the main shaft out from the gearbox side and deal with the gear on it that didn't want to slide off, get that off and fit the other one, and I'll also be able to get the lay shaft assembly out and deal with the lay shaft gear as well. So much of this would have needed to be done anyway, because obviously we've got another set of clutch plates and some springs to fit anyway, so it's not much more of a problem just to undo the nut in the centre of the clutch and pull the main shaft out and work on that on the bench if need be. Right, well, I had to take the lay shaft and the main shaft out of the gearbox. The lay shaft, the full assembly came out, and the main shaft just pulled through once I got it out of the clutch centre, leaving the gears that run on the sleeve gear or main shaft sleeve in situ. So I've got this lot here supported, as you can see, in the vise. The vise isn't tightened up on anything, it's not crushing any gear teeth or anything, and I'm hoping to use my friend the copper mallet here just to give a few blows to the end of the lay shaft and hopefully drive it out of that lay shaft gear that we need to change. And once I've done that, when I fit the new gear, I won't be hammering it on, I'll be pressing it on, and I'll share how I do that when I come to it. But here we are. I'm just gonna put the camera down, and I may well get flamed for this, but it does the job and it doesn't do any harm, so that's how I'm doing it. Right, I think that demonstrates that that gear wasn't going to slide off the main shaft, off the lay shaft, sorry. But anyway, I've got it off now, so all I need to do is press the one of the new set for the close ratios on there, and that'll be the lay shaft done. So I'll get that gear and fit that next. Right, here we are. There's the old lay shaft gear removed, and here's the lay shaft with the new close ratio gear in situ ready to be driven on. Now unfortunately my vise, the jaws don't open up quite wide enough. What I would have liked to have done was put this whole lot between the jaws of the vise. I've got a socket there that I'm going to use as a mandrel to press it on, but unfortunately I couldn't put that lot between the jaws of the vise and wind the vise jaws closed to press it on. So I've done the next best thing. I've got it supported in the jaws of the vise with some soft jaws in there, look, aluminium. I've got the other end of the main, the lay shaft clamped in there, and it's resting on that gear there. So next thing I'm going to do is use my copper mallet and drive the new gear on. go. Almost there. A couple of thou, I would say. That's fully home. Now that may have appeared to be and sounded pretty barbaric, but trust me, a lot of them are like that. They're a very, very tight fit on the shaft. Not all of them. Some of them, like I said, some will just slide off and more or less fall off. But I've come across quite a few that have needed similar sort of force as that. But the important thing is we've got the soft jaws there and the vice supporting it. And I was using a copper mallet, not a sort of hard, high tensile steel one or anything. So that assembly is good to go back in the gearbox. The next is to deal with the corresponding gear on the end of the main shaft. I've got the gearbox main shaft supported in the jaws of the vice now, and I haven't got the soft jaws on because the engagement dog that fits behind this gear on the shaft has 3 dogs, so they're at 120 degrees, and it's not possible to get a good grip without one of the jaws of the vice being on the edge of the dog, and that doesn't give me much tooth to support. So I'm not going to do anything too dramatic or violent, but I'm going to try a few blows with the copper mallet. I know that we've got threads there, but I also know that that's very hard, and as I say, I'm using a copper mallet. So let's just see if a few fairly light blows might get this moving. It is moving. It is moving. Very gradually, but it is moving. Let's just have a look at that. I think I may have to use a bit of heat on this one, or even see if I've got a 3-leg puller that might get hold of that and pull it, because it is very tight. I don't want to hit that shaft any harder than I did there, because that could possibly result in damage, which I haven't done up to now. So I'm going to have a little bit of a rethink on this one, and we'll come back to it soon when I've hopefully come up with a solution and got it moved. Well, it looks like the lathe may have come up trumps for me, in that the 3 jaws of the chuck will grip the engagement dog out a step with its prongs, if you like, so it's got a good grip of that. I've got it as a sort of fairly firm sliding fit in the jaws of the chuck, and I've got good engagement in every 120 degrees rotation with the back of the gear that I want to get off. Let's see, heavy copper mallet again, nothing any more violent or aggressive than that. That's the oil thrower ring off, and we can see, hopefully see a gap opening up there, so it's moving. There, that's got that off. So next step, get the new gear and press that on, which again won't be as difficult as getting the old one off. Well, I had intended to share the process as I actually drove this gear onto the shaft. I had this socket placed on top of it. Actually, before I fitted the, I've just fitted the thrower ring actually, but I used this socket as a mandrel against the face of the gear. I held the main shaft in aluminium soft jaws in a vise, and I let the other end of it, the light's not very good, but the other end of the main shaft is resting on a block of brass, so so as to minimise any chances of damage. And again, I used the copper mallet to hit the socket with to drive the gear on, and it's all gone on. I would have shared this on film, but unfortunately as I started driving the gear on, some of the jolts went through the bench and the camera rolled off and hit the deck, and it damaged the recording, so we didn't get that, but there wasn't anything terribly exciting about it. But here we are. This is the main shaft ready to go. I've already got the lay shaft ready to go, so I'm ready to just put everything back together now, and we should have a close ratio 4-speed gearbox, all being well. Because I didn't remove the primary drive assembly in its entirety, I left the alternator and engine sprocket, primary chain and clutch basket and centre all loosely in position. I used this mandrel through the centre of the clutch into the main shaft sleeve just to locate the clutch centre roughly where I needed it to get the end of the main shaft started in the clutch centre. I've also got it, as you can see, I've got it supported by this bungee just to hold it up, and a piece of wood there just to help line it up. But I was able to push the main shaft in from the other side, and that's pushed this mandrel out, and all I need to do now is fiddle about and get the splines on the main shaft engaged with the corresponding splines in the clutch centre and get it home, and everything's back in situ in the gearbox. Got the lay shaft in there, there's the main shaft, it's still got a little way to go. The new gears are on, so I'll have to fiddle about and swear at the clutch centre and the main shaft for a little while, but I'll get them back in place shortly, and then the gearbox end cover will be able to go back on again. So that's another obstacle and hurdle overcome. Well, that's the gearbox all reassembled with the close ratio gears fitted to the shafts, and I'm ready to put the end cover on. I've got a new gasket stuck onto the gasket face there, the end cover all cleaned up ready to go. And if we go around the other side, there's the clutch, still supported by my bungee band at the moment, but the shaft is part way through. And what I'll do is, once I've got the end cover on the gearbox, then I'll have something firm to drive against to drive the clutch centre back onto the main shaft as far as it needs to go. So next up, I'll refit this end cover, and then I'll be able to drive the clutch home and put that back together with the new plates and the new springs. Right, I've got the gearbox all back together now, and it's working. I've changed up and down through the gears on the bike lift, and everything seems to be working okay. I've got a little bit more work to do on the clutch. I've got that all back together, but there is drag on that which I'm going to try and address. But here I am, about to fill the engine, the gearbox with lubricant. Now then, how much grease should I put in the gearbox? Answer: none. That there is an oil level plug. That down there is an oil drain plug, and that one there is an oil filler plug. Now, none of those would be much use if you were supposed to put grease in the gearbox, especially the level plug and the drain plug. They're there to let the oil run out, one when it's at the correct level and one when you want to change the oil, and that is because you put oil in it, which is what I'm going to do now. And then I'll be happy that the gearbox is good to go. Here we go, put some oil in there. It's usually one of these bottlefuls of oil will do it. Now, I'm using engine oil, which you can use, Gearbox oil, the thicker stuff, is quite acceptable too, and quite a good option, but I just wouldn't put grease in one myself. It's obviously stemmed from some sort of bodge when someone's perhaps had a gearbox oil seal fail and it's caught on, I don't know. But these engines don't give out a lot of power in any case, and to have those big gears churning round in thick heavy grease is not going to promote or help what little power there is available from the engine get through the clutch and to the rear wheel. You'd be surprised how much energy and power it would take for that gearbox to keep paddling all its gears around in a load of thick heavy grease all the time. So I swear by oil myself. There we are, and we can see, hopefully I'll get my torch on just in case, but we got oil coming out of the oil level plug. So we know that we've got enough oil in there. So I'm going to fit that level plug now before we get in a mess, and I'll know that the gearbox is good to go.